Part 2. Practical Resource Allocation and Stewardship. The master gardener understands that soil, water, sunlight, and nutrients are not commodities to be consumed, but sacred gifts to be stewarded, each resource flowing according to its own nature, each constraint revealing itself as creative invitation, until scarcity's illusion dissolves into abundance's patient truth. Everything needed already exists, waiting only for the wisdom to recognize it and the reverence to tend it well. The foundation has been laid with loving precision. You have learned to read the landscape of your life with the clarity of one who understands that truth liberates while fantasy enslaves. You have developed trust in the profound intelligence of your embodied wisdom, that ancient guidance system more reliable than any external advice. You have cultivated abundance consciousness that naturally sees possibility where scarcity thinking perceives only limitation. And you have discovered the sacred relationship between intentions and goals that transforms arbitrary achievement into authentic expression of your deepest nature. Now we cross the threshold into the realm of stewardship, that crucial art where vision meets the daily reality of finite resources and infinite demands. Here, in the practical alchemy of conscious living, dreams either flourish into reality or wither from lack of skillful tending. This is where the poetry of possibility encounters the prose of limitation, where the expansive vision of your authentic life must find expression through the narrow channels of time's relentless flow, attention's finite capacity, energy's natural rhythms, and money's stubborn mathematics. Every master of any craft discovers the same truth. Success flows not from having unlimited resources, but from stewarding limited ones with extraordinary wisdom. The musician with access to every instrument who never masters one versus the street performer whose single guitar becomes an entire orchestra. The entrepreneur with infinite funding who loses focus versus the bootstrapper whose constraints force brilliant innovation. The writer with endless time who never finishes versus the parent who transforms stolen moments into literary gold. The 4 chapters ahead will transform your relationship with life's essential resources from unconscious consumption to conscious cultivation. You will discover how these 4 fundamental currencies, time, attention, energy, and money, flow through your life like streams that can either nourish your deepest purposes or drain away into the parched ground of mindless activity. You will learn to work with natural rhythms rather than against them, to find abundance within limitation, and to transform even scarcity into a teacher of innovation and focus. This is where the inner work of clarity meets the outer work of creation, where authentic intention takes root in the fertile soil of skillful action. Here you become not just the dreamer of your life, but its conscious architect, building a reality that honors both your soaring aspirations and the humbling constraints that give them shape. The 4 essential nutrients: time, attention, energy, and money, water, sunlight, nutrients, and soil. The master gardener knows these 4 elements as sacred resources that can either be squandered in mindless excess or stewarded with reverence to create abundance that nourishes both garden and gardener. There exists a moment in every life when the illusion of infinite resources finally crumbles, revealing the stark mathematics of finite existence that no amount of optimism can overcome. Perhaps it arrives during the sleepless nights of new parenthood, when time becomes more precious than gold, and every minute stolen for yourself feels like a small miracle. Maybe it emerges in the crushing weight of financial pressure, when the gap between needs and means forces radical reassessment of what truly matters. Or it might dawn during illness or loss, when energy becomes rationed and attention narrows to what can no longer be taken for granted. This moment of reckoning, though often painful, offers a profound gift. The recognition that how you steward your limited resources literally determines what becomes possible in your experience of being alive. Your time is not infinite. Your attention will scatter if unguarded. Your energy operates according to laws as immutable as physics. Your money responds to consciousness or its absence with mathematical precision. Yet within these constraints lies extraordinary opportunity, for scarcity becomes the mother of wisdom, just as limitation births innovation. When you finally accept that you cannot have everything, you discover the profound satisfaction of choosing consciously. When you release the fantasy of unlimited time, you learn to inhabit moments with presence that transforms ordinary experience into sacred encounter. When you acknowledge attention's finite nature, you develop the capacity to direct this precious resource toward what deserves it most. The master craftsperson understands that excellence emerges not from having unlimited materials, but from knowing these materials so intimately that waste becomes impossible, and every element serves the highest vision. The chef who transforms simple ingredients into extraordinary cuisine through understanding their essential properties. The architect who creates soaring beauty within the rigid constraints of physics and budget. The poet who finds infinite expression within the formal limitations of sonnet or haiku. Your life operates according to these same principles of conscious stewardship, where mastery comes not through accumulating more resources, but through understanding the ones you possess so deeply that their allocation becomes an art form of its own. Time as topsoil. Understanding time allocation as foundation of growth, time holds the strange distinction of being both the most democratic and most precious resource we possess. Every human being receives exactly 24 hours each day, yet the experience of those hours varies so dramatically that some people create lasting beauty, deep relationships, and meaningful contribution, while others seem to vanish into the digital ether of distraction and obligation, wondering where their lives went. The difference lies not in the hours themselves, but in the consciousness brought to their allocation. Time, like topsoil, provides the fundamental medium in which everything else must grow. Poor soil, no matter how much space it covers, cannot support thriving life. Rich soil, even in small quantities, can nourish abundance beyond what its dimensions might suggest. The ecology of hours. Your relationship with time creates an ecology as complex and fragile as any natural system. Each choice about where to invest minutes and hours shapes not only immediate outcomes, but the long-term fertility of your life soil. Activities that nourish your authentic development, relationships, and contribution create compound benefits that enrich every future choice. Activities that drain without providing proportional value gradually impoverish the very ground from which satisfaction and meaning must grow. Consider how different approaches to time create different internal climates. The person who moves through days with presence and intentionality cultivates a sense of spaciousness even within busy schedules. Their time feels abundant because it aligns with authentic priorities and flows according to natural rhythms rather than artificial urgency. Contrast this with the experience of someone caught in reactive patterns, responding to external demands without conscious choice, filling every moment with activity, but never feeling productive or satisfied. Their time feels scarce because it serves purposes imposed from outside rather than arising from within, creating the exhausting sensation of being busy while accomplishing little that matters. The ecology of time allocation operates according to principles that become visible only through patient observation. Some activities appear productive, but gradually deplete your capacity for the deep work that creates lasting value. Others seem insignificant, yet restore your ability to engage fully with everything else. Learning to distinguish between these requires developing what might be called temporal wisdom, the ability to sense which investments of time will nourish versus drain your overall system. The paradox of presence. One of the most counterintuitive discoveries about time stewardship is that the experience of having enough time comes not from managing minutes more efficiently, but from inhabiting moments more completely. When your attention fragments across multiple concerns, even abundant time feels rushed and insufficient. When you gather your awareness into full presence with whatever you're doing, even brief periods can feel rich and satisfying. This paradox challenges the common assumption that time scarcity requires speed as a solution. In reality, the rushed mind often creates its own time poverty by skimming across the surface of experience without allowing depth to develop. The parent who races through bedtime stories misses the joy that could transform this routine into a treasured connection. The worker who multitasks through meetings accomplishes less than focused engagement would achieve while feeling constantly behind. Presence transforms time from a resource to be consumed into a dimension to be inhabited. When you bring full attention to preparing a meal, the activity becomes meditation as well as nutrition. When you listen completely during conversations, relationships deepen, while information transfers more effectively. When you work with concentrated focus, productivity increases while stress decreases. This shift from time management to time inhabitation requires releasing the mental pressure that treats every moment as an opportunity cost, the anxiety that whispers you should always be doing something else. Instead, you learn to sink into whatever you're doing with the trust that presence itself creates value beyond what can be measured in outputs or achievements. Digital quicksand and the attention economy. We live in an era when entire industries profit from consuming your time and attention, creating sophisticated systems designed to fragment your awareness and capture your precious hours. Social media platforms engineer intermittent reinforcement schedules more compelling than any casino. News cycles create artificial urgency that transforms current events into psychological emergencies requiring constant monitoring. This digital environment presents challenges to conscious time stewardship that previous generations never faced. The device in your pocket contains more distractions than existed in entire cities a generation ago, each one designed by teams of neuroscientists and behavioral economists to capture and monetize your attention. Breaking free from these digital time traps requires more than willpower or simple restrictions. It demands understanding how these systems exploit basic human needs for connection, novelty, and significance in ways that provide the simulation of satisfaction without its substance. The endless scroll that promises the next post might be the one that matters. The notifications that create the illusion of importance and social connection while actually preventing the deep engagement that creates real importance and authentic relationship. Reclaiming sovereignty over your time in this environment becomes an act of consciousness revolution, requiring intentional creation of boundaries, rhythms, and alternative sources of the deep satisfactions that digital consumption promises but cannot deliver. The currency of presence time becomes truly valuable only when exchanged for presence, that quality of full engagement that transforms ordinary moments into experiences worth having. You cannot buy presence with efficiency, cannot manufacture it through productivity systems, cannot accumulate it for future use. Presence emerges only through the conscious choice to be fully where you are, doing what you're doing, with whatever is actually happening, rather than what you wish were happening. This recognition shifts time allocation from a scarcity-based strategy of cramming more activities into available hours toward an abundance-based approach of extracting more aliveness from whatever time you have. The shift from quantity to quality, from speed to depth, from doing more to being more present with what you're already doing. Integration practice, time as sacred ground. Begin treating time as the sacred foundation of your lived experience rather than a resource to manage or overcome. Presence experiments. Throughout this week, choose one routine activity each day to perform with complete attention. This might be brushing your teeth, washing dishes, walking to your car, or any ordinary action you typically rush through while thinking about something else. Notice how presence transforms even mundane activities into opportunities for aliveness and awareness. Transition consciousness. Create brief conscious transitions between activities rather than rushing from one thing to another. This might be 3 breaths before starting your computer, a moment of intention setting before entering your home, or a pause to appreciate completion before beginning the next task. Observe how these micro-transitions affect your sense of spaciousness and flow throughout the day. Time ecology assessment. Track your energy and satisfaction levels in response to different time allocations. Which activities consistently leave you feeling more alive and engaged? Which create fatigue that goes beyond physical tiredness? Where do you notice your attention naturally wanting to go when freed from external demands? Use this information to gradually shift your time ecology toward what nourishes rather than depletes your system. Attention as water, directing the essential flow that enables growth. If time is the soil of consciousness, then attention is the water that brings everything to life. Without attention's animating flow, even the richest opportunities remain dormant potential. Where attention flows, experience deepens, relationships flourish, skills develop, and meaning emerges. Where it is absent or scattered, life feels flat and disconnected, like a garden where water never penetrates below the surface. Yet attention has become the most embattled resource of our era, under constant siege from forces that profit from its capture and fragmentation. Every device, platform, and digital service competes for the precious stream of your awareness, creating an environment where sustained focus requires the kind of intention that previous generations reserved for spiritual disciplines. The hydraulics of awareness attention operates according to hydraulic principles that determine its effectiveness in nourishing growth. Like water pressure in irrigation systems, attention can flow with sufficient force to nourish deep roots or scatter weakly across the surface without penetrating where it's needed most. Concentrated attention resembles a powerful stream that can carve canyons through rock over time. When you bring focused awareness to any activity, learning, or relationship, you access dimensions of experience that scattered attention never reveals. The musician who practices with complete focus develops not just technical skill, but intimate relationship with their instrument. The reader who engages text with full attention gains not just information, but integrated understanding that becomes part of their living wisdom. Scattered attention, by contrast, is like rain on parched ground that runs off without soaking in. You can spend hours on activities while your awareness skims across the surface, never going deep enough to extract real nourishment or create lasting value. The student who highlights textbooks while mentally elsewhere. The conversation partner who nods appropriately while composing tomorrow's to-do list. The parent who attends school events while monitoring work messages. The quality of attention you bring to any experience largely determines what you receive from it. The same activity can be either meaningful or mechanical, nourishing or depleting, memorable or forgettable, depending entirely on the depth and consistency of awareness you bring to the engagement. The crisis of continuous partial attention. Modern life has normalized a state that researcher Linda Stone calls continuous partial attention, where we constantly monitor multiple streams of information while never fully engaging with any single one. This creates the illusion of efficiency while actually reducing both productivity and satisfaction. Like trying to water an entire garden with a misting bottle that provides insufficient moisture for anything to truly flourish. This fragmented awareness exacts a hidden cost that compounds over time. Relationships suffer when attention divides between present conversation and digital distractions. Learning becomes shallow when reading happens alongside multiple other inputs. Work quality diminishes when focus splits between primary tasks and constant connectivity. Even rest becomes unsatisfying when relaxation attempts to happen while consuming entertainment that requires cognitive processing. The cumulative effect is a life lived primarily on the surface, where you touch many things but penetrate deeply into few. Skills develop slowly because practice lacks the concentration that creates rapid improvement. Relationships remain superficial because conversations rarely receive the focused attention that enables intimacy. Creative work stays amateur because the sustained attention that develops mastery gets diverted into reactive consumption. Developing attention as strength training. Attention can be strengthened like any other capacity through practices that challenge its current limits while supporting its gradual development. This training becomes essential in an environment designed to fragment and weaken your natural ability to sustain focus, like developing physical fitness in a culture that encourages sedentary consumption. Single-tasking practices rebuild the muscle of sustained attention by returning to activities that require and reward depth, reading books without digital interruption, engaging in conversations without multitasking, working on projects with phones in other rooms, cooking meals without background entertainment. These practices initially feel challenging because they reveal how much your attention has become accustomed to constant stimulation, but they gradually restore your capacity for the deep engagement that creates meaning. Meditation and contemplative practices provide direct training for the attention itself, developing your ability to notice when awareness wanders and gently return it to chosen objects of focus. This skill transfers to every other activity, improving your capacity to remain present during important conversations, focused during demanding work, and aware during routine activities that could become opportunities for mindfulness. Nature immersion naturally restores attention through what researchers call involuntary attention, where the gentle fascination of natural environments allows directed attention to rest and regenerate. Time in forests, by water, or even observing clouds can restore your capacity for sustained focus while providing the psychological restoration that makes demanding attention tasks feel manageable rather than depleting. The river of awareness. Learning to direct attention skillfully requires understanding its flowing nature rather than trying to control it like a machine. Attention moves like water, following natural channels while responding to obstacles and opportunities. Fighting against its nature creates turbulence and exhaustion. Working with its natural characteristics allows for graceful direction that feels effortless rather than forced. Attention naturally wants to flow toward what is alive, novel, meaningful, or threatening. Understanding these natural tendencies helps you work with rather than against your awareness. If you need to focus on routine tasks, you can introduce elements of novelty or connect the work to larger purposes that naturally attract attention. If you want to reduce focus on worrying thoughts, you can redirect attention toward present sensory experience that provides more compelling input. The key is learning to guide attention's flow rather than forcing its direction, creating conditions that naturally support the kind of focus you want to develop rather than demanding concentration through willpower alone. In integration practice, cultivating the stream of awareness. Begin treating attention as a flowing resource that can be directed with skill rather than scattered by default. Single focus experiments. Each day this week, engage in one activity with complete, undivided attention. This might be reading a few pages of a book, having one conversation, or working on a project for a specified time without any other inputs. Notice the difference between this quality of engagement and your typical divided attention patterns. Attention restoration rituals. Create daily practices that allow your directed attention to rest and restore naturally. This might include brief periods outdoors, listening to music without doing anything else, or simply sitting quietly and observing your breathing. Pay attention to how these restoration periods affect your capacity for focused work afterward. Digital boundary experiments. Establish specific boundaries around digital inputs that compete for your attention. This might include device-free meals, notification-free work periods, or morning routines that begin with presence rather than information consumption. Observe how these boundaries affect both your ability to focus and your overall sense of well-being and spaciousness. Energy as sunlight, managing life force for sustainable cultivation. Energy flows through your life like sunlight through a garden, providing the fundamental power that makes everything else possible. Without adequate energy, all the time and attention in the world cannot create the sustained engagement that meaningful accomplishment requires. Yet energy has become perhaps the most misunderstood resource of modern life. Treat it as something to force through stimulants rather than cultivate through wisdom, to spend rather than steward, to override rather than honor. True energy management begins with recognizing that your vital force operates according to natural laws as reliable as those governing any ecosystem. Plants cannot photosynthesize in darkness, no matter how much water and fertilizer they receive. Similarly, you cannot create sustainable productivity by depleting energy faster than you restore it, regardless of how many efficiency techniques you employ. The spectrum of vital force. Human energy exists in multiple forms that cannot be used interchangeably, though our culture often attempts to substitute one type for another with diminishing returns. Physical energy provides the foundation for all other forms, like soil health in a garden that affects everything planted there. Mental energy powers focus, analysis, and creative thinking. Emotional energy fuels relationships, passion, and sustained motivation. Spiritual energy provides meaning, resilience, and connection to purposes larger than personal survival. Understanding these different energy types prevents the common mistake of trying to solve physical depletion with mental stimulation, emotional exhaustion with productivity systems, or spiritual emptiness with material consumption. Coffee cannot replace the restoration that only sleep provides. Information cannot substitute for the renewal that comes from meaningful relationships. Achievement cannot fill the void that only purpose and meaning can satisfy. Each type of energy has its own requirements for renewal and its own patterns of depletion. Physical energy restores through sleep, movement, nutrition, and contact with natural environments. Mental energy renews through variety, challenge, learning, and periods of unfocused rest. Emotional energy replenishes through connection, beauty, play, and activities that align with your authentic values. Spiritual energy restores through contemplation, service, creative expression, and experiences that connect you to transcendent meaning. The rhythms of sustainable power. Your energy operates according to rhythms as predictable as ocean tides, with natural cycles of expansion and contraction, activity and rest, giving and receiving that create the foundation for sustainable performance. Working against these rhythms creates the kind of forced productivity that it might appear impressive short-term, but it inevitably leads to depletion, burnout, and the need for extended recovery periods. Daily energy cycles typically include periods of emergence, peak performance, collaborative engagement, and restoration. Most people experience their strongest mental energy during the first few hours after waking, making this optimal time for demanding cognitive work. Physical energy often peaks mid-morning, while social energy may be highest in afternoon or early evening. Understanding your personal daily rhythm allows you to align demanding activities with natural energy peaks while protecting low energy periods for restoration or routine tasks. Weekly rhythms often follow patterns of building momentum, peak output, and natural decline toward rest and renewal. Monthly and seasonal cycles create longer patterns that affect your capacity for different types of activities and your need for various forms of restoration. Hormonal cycles, particularly for those who menstruate, create additional rhythms that can become powerful allies when understood and honored, rather than ignored or overridden. Working with these natural rhythms multiplies your effectiveness while reducing the effort required to maintain performance. Like sailing with the wind rather than against it, aligning activities with energy cycles creates flow states where work feels effortless and sustainable rather than forced and depleting. The economics of vitality energy operates according to economic principles that determine whether your overall vitality increases or decreases over time. Some activities function like investments, requiring initial energy expenditure, but generating returns that exceed the original cost. Others operate like consumption, providing immediate gratification while depleting reserves without creating lasting value. Energy investments include activities that build capacity, create efficiency, or generate sustainable satisfaction. Learning new skills requires initial energy output, but eventually reduces the effort needed for related tasks while increasing your capability. Developing relationships demands emotional investment, but creates support systems that provide energy during challenging periods. Maintaining physical health requires daily energy allocation, but prevents the larger energy drains of illness and low vitality. Energy consumption includes activities that provide temporary stimulation or pleasure while contributing little to your long-term capacity or well-being. These aren't necessarily harmful in moderation, but become problematic when they dominate your energy budget at the expense of investments that would create lasting benefits. The key insight is that sustainable energy management requires maintaining a positive balance where investments exceed consumption over time, gradually building reserves and capacity rather than constantly depleting limited resources through reactive spending. Beyond stimulation to vitality, modern culture often confuses stimulation with energy, leading to approaches that provide temporary activation while undermining the natural sources of sustained vitality. Caffeine can enhance alertness when used strategically, but cannot replace the deep restoration that only adequate sleep provides. Digital entertainment can provide distraction from fatigue, but cannot create the renewal that comes from meaningful engagement or restorative rest. True vitality emerges from practices that work with rather than against your natural energy systems. This includes honoring sleep as productive time rather than lost hours, treating movement as energy creation rather than just calorie burning, approaching nutrition as fuel optimization rather than pleasure regulation, and understanding rest as active restoration rather than passive collapse. The difference between artificial stimulation and authentic vitality becomes apparent in how they affect your overall system. Stimulation often creates initial elevation, followed by crash cycles that gradually deplete your baseline energy. Vitality practices might require initial effort, but create sustainable elevation in your overall capacity and well-being. Integration practice. Energy as sacred power source. Begin treating energy as the life force that powers all your capacities, rather than a resource to exploit or override. Energy type awareness. Throughout this week, notice how different activities affect your various energy types. Which activities energize your body while draining your mind? Which provide emotional renewal while requiring physical effort? Which create mental stimulation while depleting spiritual reserves? Use this awareness to design days that nourish rather than deplete your overall energy system. Rhythm recognition. Track your natural energy patterns across daily, weekly, and longer cycles. When do you consistently feel most alert and capable? When does your body naturally want to rest or be active? How do seasonal changes affect your energy and motivation? Experiment with aligning important activities with your natural energy peaks while protecting low energy periods for restoration. Investment versus consumption. Assessment. Evaluate your regular activities for their long-term effects on your energy reserves. Which activities initially require effort but leave you feeling more energized overall? Which provide immediate gratification but gradually drain your vitality? How might you shift the balance toward energy investments that build rather than deplete your long-term capacity? Money as fertilizer. Using financial resources to enhance natural growth. Money occupies a unique position among life's resources because it represents crystallized time and energy that can be deployed to enhance all other capacities. Like fertilizer in the garden, money can dramatically accelerate growth when applied wisely to healthy systems. But it can also burn delicate roots when used carelessly or become a substitute for the fundamental work that no external resource can replace. The key insight that transforms your relationship with money is recognizing it as stored life force rather than abstract numbers and accounts. Every dollar represents someone's time and energy converted into a form that can flow toward purposes and possibilities. When you spend money unconsciously, you waste not just financial resources, but the condensed life energy that money represents. When you use money consciously, you multiply your capacity to create value, serve others, and express your authentic nature in the world. Reframing financial resources as life energy, understanding money as crystallized time and energy transforms every financial decision from abstract calculation into conscious choice about how to direct life force toward your authentic priorities. This reframe immediately clarifies the difference between expenses that enhance your capacity and those that merely provide temporary stimulation or social signaling. When you recognize that money represents stored energy, spending decisions become clearer. Investments in health, education, tools that improve your work, or experiences that expand your understanding multiply your capacity to create future value. Purchases that provide only temporary pleasure or status without building lasting capability represent energy directed toward consumption rather than creation. This perspective also transforms how you approach earning money. Work becomes an opportunity to convert your unique talents and efforts into a form that can flow toward your deepest values and highest contributions. The question shifts from, how can I make the most money, to how can I create the most value while earning the resources I need to live according to my authentic priorities. Money earned through work that aligns with your values and develops your capacities feels different than money earned through activities that compromise your integrity or waste your talents. The former energizes your entire system because it represents coherent flow between your authentic nature and your financial needs. The latter often feels depleting even when financially rewarding because it requires you to spend life energy in ways that conflict with your deeper purposes. The process of conscious spending. Conscious spending transforms money from a scarce resource to be hoarded into a tool for enhancing life in ways that align with your authentic values and support your continued development. This shift requires moving beyond reactive consumption toward intentional allocation that serves your genuine needs and deepest priorities. Value-based spending begins with clarity about what you actually value versus what advertising, social pressure, or unconscious patterns suggest you should want. This requires honest assessment of which purchases genuinely enhance your life satisfaction and capacity versus which provide only temporary stimulation or social approval. The practice includes pausing before purchases to ask essential questions. Does this align with my authentic values and priorities? Will this purchase enhance my capacity to create, contribute, or experience life more fully? Am I buying this to meet a genuine need or to avoid feeling something I need to process? How will I feel about this purchase in a week, a month, a year? Time buying represents one of the most powerful applications of conscious spending, where money purchases freedom from activities that drain your energy without providing proportional value. This might include hiring services for household tasks you don't enjoy, purchasing tools that eliminate repetitive manual work, or paying for convenience that frees your time and attention for activities that only you can do. The return on investment for time buying and friction-reducing purchases is measured not in financial terms but in increased capacity for activities that align with your authentic interests and contribute to your growth and service. Money as investment in systems. The most powerful use of money involves creating systems that continue providing value long after the initial expenditure, like fertilizer that improves soil health rather than just providing temporary plant stimulation. These investments compound over time, gradually increasing your capacity and reducing your ongoing resource requirements. Health investments support the physical foundation that makes everything else possible while preventing the much larger financial costs of illness and low vitality. This includes quality food, preventive health care, fitness resources, and stress management that maintain your energy and resilience over decades. Education and skill development investments enhance your capacity to create value through your natural talents and interests. This includes formal learning workshops, coaching, books, and any development that increases your ability to contribute meaningfully while earning sustainable income. Tool and infrastructure investments eliminate ongoing friction and inefficiency, freeing your time and energy for higher value activities. This might include technology that automates routine tasks, workspace improvements that enhance your productivity, or equipment that makes important work more enjoyable and effective. Relationship investments through shared experiences, generous gifts, and activities that deepen connection create social capital that provides support, opportunities, and meaning that money alone cannot purchase. Beyond accumulation to flow, perhaps the most profound shift in conscious money stewardship involves moving from accumulation-based thinking toward flow-based understanding. Money, like energy, is meant to circulate rather than stagnate. The goal becomes not maximum accumulation, but optimal flow that serves both your authentic needs and your capacity to contribute value to others. This perspective transforms financial planning from scarcity-based hoarding toward abundance-based stewardship that balances current needs, future security, and generous contribution to purposes larger than personal consumption. Money becomes a tool for creating the kind of life that allows you to offer your unique gifts rather than an end goal that consumes life energy without providing proportional meaning. Generous giving, when practiced wisely, creates circulation that often returns unexpected benefits while contributing to the collective well-being that supports everyone's flourishing. The key is giving from abundance rather than sacrifice, contributing what you can afford without compromising your own stability and capacity. Integration practice. Money as life, energy, and motion. Begin approaching money as crystallized life force that can enhance your capacity when used with wisdom and intention. Life energy awareness. Before making purchases this week, pause to consider the life energy represented by the money you're spending. How many hours of work does this purchase represent? Does spending this life energy on this item align with your authentic values and priorities? Would your time and energy be better directed elsewhere? Value alignment assessment. Evaluate your recent spending patterns for alignment with your stated values and genuine priorities. Which purchases genuinely enhanced your capacity for growth, contribution, or authentic living? Which provided only temporary satisfaction or social signaling? How might you gradually shift spending toward investments that support your authentic development? System investment identification. Look for opportunities to use money to create systems that will provide ongoing value and reduce future resource requirements. This might include tools that eliminate routine friction, education that develops valuable capabilities, health investments that increase long-term vitality, or infrastructure improvements that support your important work. The four essential nutrients of conscious living, time, attention, energy, and money, flow through your experience like streams that can either nourish your deepest purposes or drain away into unconscious consumption. Learning to steward these resources with wisdom transforms them from sources of stress and limitation into allies that support your authentic expression and meaningful contribution. When time becomes sacred ground for presence rather than a race to be won, when attention flows like water toward what deserves to flourish, when energy burns like sustainable sunlight rather than consuming stimulation, and when money fertilizes growth rather than substituting for the natural processes of development, your life becomes a masterpiece of conscious stewardship that serves both your individual flourishing and the collective well-being of all whose lives you touch.